أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. عن جابر بن عبد الله الأنصاري عن فاطمة الزهراء عليها السلام بنت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله قال: سمعت فاطمة أنها قالت: دخل علي أبي رسول الله في بعض الأيام فقال: السلام عليك يا فاطمة. فقلت: عليك السلام. قال: إني أجد في بدني ضعفا. فقلت له: أعيذك بالله يا أبتاه من الضعف. فقال: يا فاطمة ائتيني بالكساء اليمان فغطيني به. فأتيت بالكساء اليمان فغطيت به وسرت أنظر إليه وإذا وجهه يتلألأ كأنه البدر في ليلة تمامه وكماله. فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسن قد أقبل وقال: السلام عليك يا أمه. فقلت: عليك السلام يا قرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي. فقال: يا أمه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جد رسول الله. فقلت: نعم إن جدك تحت الكساء. فأقبل الحسن نحو الكساء وقال: السلام عليك يا جدا يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أدخل معك تحت الكساء؟ فقال: وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا صاحب حوضي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل معك تحت الكساء. فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسين قد أقبل وقال: السلام عليك يا أمه. فقلت: وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا قرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي. فقال لي: يا أمه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. فقلت: نعم إن جدك وأخاك تحت الكساء. فدنا الحسين نحو الكساء وقال: السلام عليك يا جدا، السلام عليك يا من اختار الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكما تحت الكساء؟ فقال: وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا شافع أمتي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل معهما تحت الكساء. فأقبل عند ذلك أبو الحسن علي بن أبي طالب وقال: السلام عليك يا بنت رسول الله. فقلت: وعليك السلام يا أبا الحسن ويا أمير المؤمنين. فقال: يا فاطمة إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة أخي وابن عمي رسول الله. فقلت: نعم، ها هو ما ولديك تحت الكساء. فأقبل علي نحو الكساء وقال: السلام عليك يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال له: عليك السلام يا أخي ويا وسي وخليفتي وصاحب لوائي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل علي تحت الكساء. ثم أتيت نحو الكساء وقلت: السلام عليك يا أبتاه يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال وعليك السلام يا بنتي ويا بضعتي قد أذنت لك. فدخلت تحت الكساء فلما اكتملنا جميعا تحت الكساء أخذ بي رسول الله بطرفي الكساء وأومع بيده اليمنى إلى السماء وقال اللهم إن هؤلاء أهل بيتي وخاصتي وحامتي لحمهم لحمي ودمهم دمي يؤلمني ما يؤلمهم ويحزنني ما يحزنهم. أنا حرب لمن حاربهم وسلم لمن سالمهم وعدو لمن عاداهم ومحب لمن أحبهم. إنهم مني وأنا منهم. فاجعل صلواتك وبركاتك ورحمتك وغفرانك ورضوانك علي وعليهم وأذهب عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. فقال الله عز وجل يا ملائكتي ويا سكان السماوات إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا عرضا مدحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضيئة ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا في محبة هؤلاء الخمسة الذين هم تحت الكساء. فقال الأمين جبرائيل يا ربي ومن تحت الكساء؟ فقال عز وجل هم أهل بيت النبوة ومعدن الرسالة هم فاطمة وأبوها وبعلها وبنوها. فقال جبرائيل يا ربي أتعذن لي أن أحبط إلى الأرض ليكون معهم سادسا؟ فقال الله نعم قد أذنت لك. فهبط الأمين جبرائيل وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله. العلي الأعلى يقرئك السلام ويخصك بالتحية والإكرام ويقول لك وعزتي وجلالي إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا عرضا مدهية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضيئة ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا لأجلكم ومحبتكم. وقد أذن لي أن أدخل معكم فهل تأذن لي يا رسول الله؟ فقال رسول الله وعليك السلام يا أمين وحي الله إنه نعم قد أذنت لك. فدخل جبرائيل معنا تحت الكساء فقال لي أبي إن الله قد أوحى إليكم يقول إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. فقال علي لأبي يا رسول الله أخبرني ما لجلوسنا هذا تحت الكساء من الفضل عند الله. فقال النبي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واستفاني بالرسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفي جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا إلا ونزلت عليهم الرحمة وهفت بهم الملائكة واستغفرت لهم إلى يتفرقوا. فقال علي إذا والله فزنا وفاز شيعتنا ورب الكعبة. فقال النبي الثاني: يا علي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واستفاني بالرسالة نجيا، ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض، وفي جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا، وفيهم مهموم إلا وفرج الله همه، ولا مغموم إلا وكشف الله غمه، ولا طالب حاجة إلا وقضى الله حاجته. فقال علي: إذا والله فزنا وسعدنا، وكذلك شيعتنا فازوا وسعدوا في الدنيا والآخرة ورب الكعبة.
سورة البركة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يعدي حقه المجتهدون، الذي بعد فلا يرى وكرب فشهد النجوى تبارك وتعالى. الصلاة والسلام على الرسول المسدد والمصطفى الأمجد أبي القاسم محمد، اللهم صل على وبآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم ومبغضيهم وغاصب حقوقهم من يومنا هذا إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم وهو أصدق القائلين: إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد. So again, I begin in the name of Allah, the Beneficent and the Merciful, the one who is so merciful that He gives us the opportunity and the intellect to recognize Him and to turn towards Him when in need. And we are blessed to be His creation. On that note, I say Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We are celebrating the Wiladat, birth anniversary of our 10th Imam, Imam Aliyun Naqi salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. He is also known as Al-Hadi, Imam Al-Hadi. Now, just to give you a preamble and the political situation at his time and how, because you see the importance of this Imam is that on one side it is Ahlul Bayt, and the other side this is the government, the political ruling government that is opposed to the Ahlul Bayt, and they know that now that Al-Hadi is there, the time of Imam al-Zamana Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajo is very near, And they were trying their level best to prevent that the 12th Imam should not be born. That's why when we talk about Imam Al-Hadi, it's extremely important to know his personality. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now, Imam Al-Hadi was born in year 214 after Hijrah. And he died in 254 after Hijrah. So his age, very young. The time that he was poisoned, about 30 years old. Or 40 years old. A man whose life, from whose life many lessons may be learned and many principles may be derived. And indeed, this is a man who is recognized with his extraordinary knowledge and his bravery, his patience, and his sacrifice. We find that when we examine the life of Imam Ali Al-Hadi, there are many lessons that we can derive. We learn about the political environment which he faced, this Imam of Ahlul Bayt. The restrictions that he faced by the ruling government, the torture that he endured by the ruling caliph, and he is with what we call the axis, that now the time of the zuhur of Imam Mahdi is very near. When we study his life, there is an unfortunate, a tragic part of his life as well. We begin to realize that the meaning of the word house arrest goes synonym with Imam Al-Hadi. Almost all his life, Mutawakkil kept him under house arrest. He was totally confined to his house. There was so much of political pressure on him that unfortunately Imam Hadi's life has not been studied in depth at that time. Because of that pressure, he was under house surveillance all the time. The people, those followers of his friends could not meet him. So his life has a historical base, but a contemporary significance, it was known only a few years ago that we witnessed Imam Al-Hadi came into light when we witnessed the bombing of his shrine in Iraq, in Samarra, a few years ago, and of his son also, Imam Al-Askari, alayhi wassalam. So you would think that many people would be affected by the bombing of his shrine. They came into limelight. Our 10th Imam and 11th Imam came into limelight because of that bombing that transpired a few years ago. Now, many who studied his life, his biography, when they saw that, us also, we were watching on the TV, the news all the time, that when they saw the shrine in Samarra destroyed, it was completely destroyed. It was bombed. But the unfortunate part is that it did not have any effect on us people except emotional. Emotionally, yes. But it did not have any effect, only emotional, temporary emotional effect that we had because we love the Ahlul Bayt. So there were many who were emotionally affected by this destruction, but not intellectually. Majority of us were not affected intellectually by Imam Al-Hadi and Imam Hassan Askari's shrine being destroyed. Now, if we are to ask many people that when Samarra was bombed, when the shrines were bombed, did it affect you emotionally or did it affect them emotionally? People say yes, it did. But when you got the news, when you saw that the shrine has been bombed, did you take a few minutes, now that you realized that these two Imam shrine has been bombed, did we, by any chance, did it affect you that much intellectually that you would go and read a book on Imam Al-Hadi or his life? How many of us did that? Yes, emotionally we were affected, definitely. But how many of us did actually get so emotionally, intellectually affected that we picked up a book or we tried to find something online to see what these real personalities are? But no, not really. Majority of us, no. So there are many of us until today who do not know much about Imam Al-Hadi, me included. I started to know when I started researching and when I started reading books, went into deep, because I had to prepare a lecture, to be honest. And it's with profundity I can say that there were so many things that I found that I really did not know about Imam Al-Hadi alayhi salam, till I started reading books a few months ago. And many of us today, till today, who do not know much about Imam Al-Hadi and Imam Al-Askari. Both of these Imams are known as Askariyin. Why? Because majority of their life, they lived in Samarra under house arrest all the time. And they both passed away there. So they are known as Askariyin. Now what we do not realize is the beginning of the political pressure on the Imams, because the recognition now, the time of the birth of Imam Al-Mahdi was approaching. Now this time of Imam Al-Mahdi, his birth is connected to, directly to Imam Al-Hadi and Imam Hasan Al-Askari alayhi salam. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. For example, if you study the text of the Zaydi text, you know there is a community called Zaydis. In Yemen today, we know about them, the Zaydi text. And there is a book that they have written is Al-Rad Al-Rafida. Al-Rad Al-Rafida by Qasim ibn Ibrahim Al-Rassi. He is a Zaydi following the Zaydi sect who was living in the time of our 10th Imam alayhi salam. Now, he is a Zaydi, and you know Zaydis, they follow up to Imam Zainul Abidin, and then they deviate, they continue with the line of Zayd, his son. So he would talk about the fact that Imam Al-Hadi, he has written that he also concedes that this is Imam Al-Hadi is considered as the 10th Imam of Al-Rafida. They used to call us Rafida, or they still do call us Rafida. Rafida means they reject. We reject. I don't want to go into details. Rafida is to reject. Rafida. In other words, people knew that the Prophet had a hadith that there will be 12 Khalifas after me. Now this Zaydi person, he confirms that this is the 10th in line of the Prophet's hadith. All of them are or will be from Quraysh. And this person is mentioning that Imam Al-Hadi was the 10th of the Imam in the lineage of the Rafida, in the lineage of the hadith of the Prophet. He was number 10. Which would indicate that the Abbasi Khulafa knew that the advent of Imam Al-Mahdi is approaching, because put 2 and 2 together. The hadith of the Prophet, 12 Khalifas after me. He is 10th. So 11th and 12th. So they knew, and they would go to any extent to stop the birth of Imam Zaman. And they knew that is why Imam Al-Hadi is pivotal as far as we Shias are concerned. So when we study his life of Imam Al-Hadi, we are approaching, like, he is, most of the time he is under house arrest. Major surveillance of the house of Imam of Ahlul Bayt. Imam Muhammad Taqi, the same. Imam Hasan Askari, even worse. So let's in brief discuss the life and see what lessons we can learn from or derive from Imam Al-Hadi alayhi salam. Salawat ala Muhammad. Now, as I mentioned, Imam Al-Hadi was born in the 214th Hijrah, today. 214 years after Hijrah. Most of us, we don't know, most of us, unless it is being taught, continuously in madrasas and all that. But most of us, we are not aware that his mother's name is Sumana Al-Maghribiyya. Sumana Al-Maghribiyya. Maghrib, you see in Arabic, Maghrib is a country in today's language, is what's Morocco. And she was from Morocco, from North Africa. Sumana Al-Maghribiyya. In other words, his mother was a lady from North Africa. Now, how many imams do we have? There are a number of imams now whose mothers are all from North Africa. Marrakesh, Mauritania, Algeria, Morocco. Most of the later imams. You'll begin to notice that there isn't any movement of the imams going back to the ladies to Medina or getting married to a lady from Medina or Mecca. No. It's all ladies now from North African descent. And the reason of what is it? First, of course, is to remove the discrimination and racism in Islam. That never should a Muslim community should allow their children to get married or son to get married to a lady from the followers of Ahlul Bayt just because of her race. So this is to abolish or negate sort of a discrimination or racism. So when you read Imam Al-Hadi's biography or life, or Imam Al-Jawad, it is said that their complexion, Imam Al-Jawad, 9th Imam, and Imam Al-Hadi, 10th Imam, both. Their complexion was a bit darker than the Arab skin. The Arab skin is a little fairer, but they were on the darker side because their mothers were from North Africa. Naturally, they are marrying women from North Africa, so obviously their children will not have a lighter skin, lighter complexion. It will appear as a darker complexion, and we notice this as Sumana Al-Maghribiyya, the mother of the 10th Imam, the narrations say was one of the most pious women in Arabia. A devout person, a lady of Quran, a lady of narration of the Prophet. And Imam Al-Jawad, as we know, was married, 9th Imam, was first married to Al-Fadl. And Al-Fadl was the daughter of the then Caliph Ma'mun. And this is the lady who poisoned him. So he had no children from Al-Fadl, the daughter of Ma'mun. So he married Sumana. She was from Morocco. And she gave birth to Imam Al-Hadi alayhi salam. Salawat ala Muhammad wa Muhammad. Now, Imam Al-Hadi's life was more difficult than his father's, Imam Al-Jawad's, Imam Muhammad Taqi's. Why? Because Imam Al-Jawad was 8 years old when they tested him on his lineage of Imamah. He was 8 years old. So if Imam is born in 214, Imam Al-Hadi, if he's born in 214, Imam Al-Jawad died in 220. So Imam Al-Hadi is only 6 years old. He's a child. Child, 6 years old. What do you expect from a child? He's a 6 years old. So Imam Al-Hadi was how old? When they announced his imamah, and his imamat was announced. 6 years old, people were in doubt. So that's why when we come to Imam al-Zaman, now see, it reduces. When we come to our 12th Imam, what do we see? That we notice that Imamah, lineage of Imamah continued, and Imamat of Imam al-Zamana was announced when he was 5 years old. Even younger than Imam Al-Hadi. He was only 5 years old when he took up the office of Imamat. Now people ask, how come 5-year-old, 6-year-old? But 5-year-old Imam al-Zaman. Now we are telling you about 10th Imam, his grandfather. Imam al-Zamana's grandfather, 10th Imam. He is 6 years old. And before that, his father, 8 years old. Imam Muhammad Taqi, only 8 years old. we notice that now begins a trend where we have imams at a very young age. 8 years, 9th Imam, 6 years, 10th Imam, and 5 years Imam Zamana. So Imam Hadi is in his infancy, we can say. I mean, he's a child, 6 years old. Mu'tasim, the caliph, makes an announcement. He called his companion. You know, our imams were always under constant surveillance. They were literally under constant surveillance by the ruling governmental authority. Now we know that Imam Jawad was 8 when he became an imam. So he calls Umar ibn Faraj, that was his personal advisor. And he says, Umar, you know that Al-Jawad was 8, means the 9th Imam was 8 when he became an imam. You remember? He said, yes. And he asked, do you believe that his knowledge was truly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He's asking his advisor. Or maybe he had some private tutor when he was young, which enhanced his knowledge at the age of 8. See, sometimes something Allah can show us overnight. You see? And that's what Quran says, فَإِذَا قَضَى أَمْرًا فَقَالَ لَهُ كُنْ فَيَكُونَ. That when Allah decrees a matter, He says be, and it is. So, Allah can show us overnight, but people are not ready to believe because of the tender age of 6. So, Mu'tasim says, Umar, do you think that his knowledge is bestowed by Allah? Umar said, Mu'tasim, what does it matter? I mean, what does it matter? It may be from Allah. It may not be from Allah. It may be from a private tutor. I mean, what have you got to do with it? He said very well now that Al-Jawad he's passed away. He's left this world, 9th Imam. His son Al-Hadi is 6. Maybe, now see how this evil mind works at that time. He says, Omar, that maybe if we get to Al-Hadi in this tender age, you know, it's very easy to manipulate children because they absorb everything like sponge. So if we get to Al-Hadi at this age, he may not have as much knowledge as his father, Al-Jawad. I mean, subhanallah. You see how their mind works? Those who are anti-Ahlul Bayt. See how these minds work. 6, 8. These are all from the lineage of Ahlul Bayt. They have been endowed special favors by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They have been chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are the people who inherit the knowledge from the Prophet to Imam Ali, Imam Hassan, and all the way down to Imam Zamana. So you know what they did? They got, Ma'amun says, Mu'tasim says, go and bring a tutor. They called the tutor by the name of Ubaidullah al-Junaidi. Excellent scholar at that time. Masters. He had masters of science of hadith. He had mastered ethics, knowledge of ethics. He had mastered Arabic grammar. He had masters in different vistas of sciences. And he was called, he comes to Mu'tasim. Mu'tasim looked at him and said, listen, you know that the 6-year-old boy? So he says, which 6-year-old boy? He said, oh, this son of Jawad. So he said, yes. He said, we want you to be his tutor. We want you to give him tuition. Give him tuition. Teach him from now on. Now, Ubaidullah Junaidi interrupted and said, Mu'tasim, why? Why? These are individuals from the Ahlul Bayt. Mu'tasim said, no. We want you to get into his mind before any other person can get to him. Means brainwashing. Get into his mind. So he said, okay, what do you want me to do? what do you want me to brainwash? Mu'tasim said, instill in him hatred towards the religion of Islam. Hatred towards the religion of Islam. And Junaidi says, Mu'tasim, I am a scholar of Islam. I have mastered all the sciences of the fiqh and Islamic sciences, and you are telling me to do exactly opposite of what I am? He said, okay, then instill in him the hatred of this idea that the family of the Prophet are chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Get it out of his mind. Brainwash him into believing in something else. Means diminish this idea of this lineage that follows in line from Imam Ali all the way down to him. Diminish that. Deviate him. So Ubaidullah Junaidi says, leave this to me. I am a scholar par excellence. I am a mature scholar, and he is but a child, 6-year-old. His father was maybe 8. He was older than him. Sante. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. His father was 8, maybe he had a private tutor, maybe. He says, 6 years old, leave it to me. So Ubaidullah Junaidi goes. Imam Al-Hadi has been instructed that someone will come and talk to you. Someone will come and tutor you. So next day he saw him, asked him, Ya Ubaidullah, how's your student doing? So he went, and then he went again, and this silsila, it continued. Ubaidullah Junaidi going to Imam to teach him, to brainwash him. After a few days, maybe a few weeks passed, so someone from Mu'tasim's palace asked him that, Ubaidullah, how's your student doing from Bani Hashim? How is he doing? He said, which student is that? He said, that kid, that child, that 6-year-old that you were told to go and tutor. He turns around and tells him, don't call him a student. Don't call him a student. Just because I've kept quiet for all this time and I've said nothing, that these are the scholars of Ali Muhammad. He's telling a person from the palace that these are the scholars of Ali Muhammad. He says, what do you mean? So Ubaidullah says that when I entered in that house on the first day, I said that to the child, and I told Hadi, I told him, recite for me. Now look at this. We should be proud that we are followers of our 12 Imams. We should be really proud, my brothers and sisters. He says, I told him, recite for me a surah from the Quran. So the child tells me that, Ubaidullah, you decide which surah, and I'll recite. I'll continue reciting. So he said, I picked a surah, the longest surah in Quran. And it's amazing, it's unbelievable. This child began and continued reciting. His voice was so melodious that I went into a trance. He continued the surah by heart. He recited the surah. And I would say, he says, Ubaidullah says to this person that his voice was so melodious that equivalent to Nabi Dawood alayhi salam, as Allah says that Nabi Dawood's voice was so melodious that whoever heard him, they used to go into some sort of a trance. When the Quran says Dawood's voice is amazing and melodious. This child's voice is like that, and I guarantee his voice is like Dawood alayhi salam. Because once he starts, he says, I cannot interrupt him. That's how melodious his voice is. And he says, you know something more extraordinary, which proves that he has knowledge from divine, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he has been endowed with knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not from this earth. This is a private tutor. He is accepting his defeat. He says what it is. He tells me, Ubaidullah says, he tells me every verse of the Quran that I ask him about. He told me in details when it was revealed, where it was revealed, how it was revealed, to whom it was revealed and to which person or entity it pertains that it was revealed. He gives out the exegesis of each and every verse of the Holy Quran. He says, can you tell me how a 6-year-old knows in details? So I approached Moses and he says, please, do not leave me with this child, because it's not me who is tutoring him. He is disciplining me. And if I continue, I will come out a totally different person. I will be brainwashed. So I want to be excused. When Al-Mu'tasim heard this, Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. When Mu'tasim heard this, he thought, yes. He says, yes, I know they have knowledge, but surely there is some way who can question them. Now, we've heard about Imam Jawad and his debate with the grand scholar at that time, Yahya ibn al-Aqsa. Now, they don't learn. See, these evil-minded people don't learn. He says, call Yahya ibn Aqsa. Call Yahya ibn Aqsa again. They're asking him, you Mu'tasim again? I mean, Yahya ibn Aqsam has already gone through humiliation against his father. He was humiliated by the 9th Imam, his father. And you want to call him again? He says, yes, call him. Now Yahya turns. Mu'tasim tells him, Yahya, I want you to ask him some tough questions. So he says, who? He says, this one, the 6-year-old child. Now, who is he? He's the son of Al-Jawad. He says, Mamun, do we have to go through this again? We have already been punished by his father. Now, do we have to really go through this again? Mu'tasim says, yes, Yahya. Ask him. So now history is repeating itself. With the father and now with the son. The father was 8 years old, the son is 6 years old. You know, he says these people, their knowledge is different. These individuals aren't chosen by men. There's some higher power that chooses them, that cherishes them, and that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Mu'tasim says, do not talk to me like that. I am the ruling caliph at this time. So don't you dare talk to me like that. Ask, command as I command. So Yahya says, okay. If the wishes of the king, Fabiha, I will do it. So he comes to Al-Hadi, and the courtiers are sitting there, and he says about Prophet Adam, he says about what? He says, I want to ask you questions. So Imam Al-Hadi says about what? So he says something about Nabi Adam, and something about Nabi Sulaiman, and something about Nabi Yusuf, and something about Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, and something about the Quran. Now, Imam Ali Al-Hadi, how old? He's not even entered in his teens, 6 years old. Now, you see, we have to understand that don't let anyone doubt our Imams. Don't let anyone allow us to meddle with our brain as far as our 12 Imams are concerned. Our Imam's knowledge is miles ahead of anyone on this earth. And we should be proud, have pride, be proud that when you say that Imam Ali Al-Hadi, Wilaya of Imam Ali Al-Hadi or Shahada of Imam Ali Al-Hadi, don't let anyone undermine us on this or compromise on these holy figures, 12 successors of the Prophet. And sometimes they say, let's go to the mosque, Kushali of Imam, Nani Kushali. Let's go to Wafat of Imam, for example, Imam Ali-Undaki, Imam Jawad, Anani Kushali, Anani Wafat. See how wrong that notion is, how wrong, my brothers and sisters. I mean, we are the losers. We are the losers because we are missing when not coming to the mosque to listen to these lectures. We are the losers, the pearls. These are the pearls of Ali Muhammad. Salawat ala Muhammad. These are the beacons of knowledge of the Ahlul Bayt and divine knowledge, descended directly from the Prophet through Imam Ali. Yahya says, first is about Nabi Adam. The tree, Nabi Adam was thrown out of Jannah because he ate from the tree that was forbidden for him to go near. So he said, the tree that he ate from, what was it originally known as? What was the tree known as? And he replies, and it is there in Hadith, he replies that it was originally known as the tree of envy, tree of jealousy. Number one. Yahya says, all right. Mu'tasim says, you happy? Shall we stop? He says, no. Ask him another question. This was too easy. So he says, Nabi Sulaiman said, we know the story. I don't want to go into the story of Nabi Sulaiman. Nabi Sulaiman wanted the takht of Bilqis. Nabi Sulaiman is in one part of the earth. And takht, the throne of Bilqis, is the other part of the earth. You know the distance. And Nabi Sulaiman is asking his courtiers there. The Queen of Sheba's throne, they were poles apart. And Sulaiman says, I want it now. Nabi Sulaiman says, I want it now, in front of me now, like in an instant. So one of the jinns said, I'll bring it. So how long? It's a few minutes. Not acceptable. It's not acceptable. Few minutes is not acceptable. Asif bin Barqiyya is the successor of Nabi Sulaiman. So Asif bin Barqiyya said, I will bring it. This is amazing. He says, I will bring it in the blink of an eye. The moment you blink, the throne will be in front of you. And behold, the throne appeared. When Asif bin Barqiyya said, the throne did appear. So Yahya says that is all fine. He says, Ya Ali Al-Hadi, Nabi Sulaiman is a prophet, correct? He said, yes. Why couldn't a prophet do it himself? I mean, he is appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he has been given the kingdom of this earth. That kingdom that Nabi Sulaiman had, no one till today has. Over everything that existed on earth, not only on earth, in the oceans, beneath the earth. You see Quran. So he says, a prophet could not have done it himself because he's a prophet. He's all powerful. He can wish and Allah will fulfill his wish. Why did he need to ask to bring the Takht Bilqis, the Queen of Sheba's throne? So Imam Hadi says, yes, he could have done it himself. But he wanted to make it clear to the people that who is the successor after he dies. That he must have the same sort of knowledge and powers that the original person has. So Allah makes them known through his successor. Nabi Sulaiman could have done it, but he made it clear to the people that who is successor after him. That was Asif bin Barqiyya. Mu'tasim says, ask again. He says in sujood, prostration, aren't we allow, it's wajib upon us, he says, to make sujood to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only? Imam Al-Hadi says, yes, but why? He says, how come, now this is in Quran, with Nabi Yusuf and Nabi Yaqub. How come Yaqub does sujood to Yusuf when he saw him in Misr, in Egypt? In the Quran it's there, that he prostrated in front of his own son. Why did Yaqub prostrate, did sujood in the Quran? It says to Yusuf. Imam Hadi says, see, in sujood we have two types of prostrations in Islam. There are two types of prostration. We have a prostration exclusively for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Absolutely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there is another prostration in obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. See, these are two different things. He says, what do you mean? He said, when Allah asked the angels to prostrate towards Adam, soon as he put his ruh in him, the angels all bowed down to Adam. Now, were they bowing down to Adam? No, that was the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are supposed to obey the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these two type of prostrations, he said. It was a prostration, the angels, what they did, and shaitan refused, was prostration of obedience. Likewise, Yaqub bowed to Yusuf. It wasn't a prostration in obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No, it was not a prostration of worship. It was a prostration of obedience from one prophet to another. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And then he says, let me ask another question about Ali ibn Abi Talib. He says, okay. He says, when Ali ibn Abi Talib fought the battle of Jamal, and he was victorious over them. But when the battle was over, he allowed them to escape after the battle. All those who were left behind in the battle of Jamal, Aisha, the Al-Mu'mineen, the wife of the Prophet, was sent back, and Imam Ali and his party were victorious over them. And he says, he let them escape after the battle finished in Jamal. But in the battle of Siffin, he did not allow one soul to escape. Why? Imam Ali did not allow one person to escape from the opposite side. Why? Now I want you to imagine this scenario that's being played out. And this is a young man, hardly 6, 7, 8, we can say, figure of speech. And he's talking about an event that transpired more than 200 years before he was born. Imam Hadi replies, Imam Ali let the opposite army escape in Jamal because those people, once the war was over, once the war was finished, they were not intent on instigating another war against him. They did not come back and fight again. They surrendered their weapons. See? They surrendered their weapons, and in Quran Allah says that bring peace between the people. Bring peace between Muslims or the brothers. But in Siffin they were all hypocrites. They were murtad, means they had left the fold of Islam. And they continued fighting, and even when they surrendered, what they did was, if they got a chance, however many times they were given a chance, they would pick up the arms, they would pick up the ammunitions, they would pick up the weapons, and they would return to fight against Imam Ali. Imam Ali spared no one, stating that this Siffin is not a war between two parties. It is war between Muslims and Kafirs, the unbelievers, literally. And he did not allow anyone to escape. So those in Jamal, by the time Jamal finished, they were still believers. On the contrary, those in Siffin, they had become murtad, they had become infidels. He says, fine, ask him a question about, now this is about the Quran, the last one, about 31, Surah 31, verse 27. Mu'tasim looked at Yahya and said, if he answers this question, it's enough for me, I will let him go. Mu'tasim is not the murderer or killer of Imam Al-Hadi. He's not. Surah 31 verse 27 says, if all the trees were penned, now this is Surah Al-Luqman. This is in Surah Luqman. Says, if all the trees were pens and all the 7 seas were ink, they will not be able to exhort the words of Allah. The words of Allah. Not the powers of Allah. Kalimatim minhum. See how it says Surah 31? Surah Luqman number 12, it says, وَلَوْ أَنَّمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ مِنْ شَجَرَةٍ أَقْلَامٌ وَالْبَحْرُ يَمُدُّهُ مِنْ بَعْدِهِ سَبْعَةٌ أَبْحُرٍ مَا نَفِدَتْ كَلِمَةُ اللَّهِ. It's Kalimatullah. Inna Allah Azizun Hakim. So he asked Al-Hadi, name me the seas and name the words. What is this seas and what is this word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What is this word? Because Allah is not in person, doesn't speak to me. And the time of wahi is finished. So what is this? These are seas, 7 seas, the oceans. Shajaratin, okay, fine, we know the trees. If all the trees become pen and all the oceans, 7 oceans become ink, they will not be able to exhort the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So name me the seas and name me the words. And Mu'tasim is amused. He says, in his mind he thought that he won't be able to answer this question. If he can answer this question, I will release him, I will let him go. Imam Hadi, barely, child, looks at Mu'tasim and he looks at Yahya ibn Aqsam and he replies. Now I will not go into details because it will take too much of time. But it is very interesting when he named those 7 oceans. It's not Atlantic, Pacific, Indian Ocean or Arctic Ocean or Antarctic Ocean. No. Not these oceans. The 7 seas, metaphorical, these are the seas of Akhirah. The 7 seas is the Sea of Yemen, number 1, the Sea of Tabariya, the Sea of Kibrit, the Sea of Bahran, the Sea of Barghut, Sea of Lisan, and Sea of Ceylan. These are the 7 seas that Imam Al-Hadi named. And he said, okay, what are these words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He says, Imam Jawad says, the words of Allah is us, Ali Muhammad. We are Kalimatullah. We are Ali Muhammad. That if you got all the trees that are pens and you got all the 7 seas that are ink, all of them, if they come together, they would not be able to exhort the virtues of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. See, the Quran testifies. Quran testifies that there is none superior than the 12 Khulafa that the Prophet nominated. He looked at him and he says, you have answered my question, you are free to go. Now Mu'tasim is the Khalifa. After this incident, he released Imam Al-Hadi and he went back to Medina. Comes Mutawakkil, now he is the murderer of Imam Al-Hadi. Comes Mutawakkil. Now just one instance and I will finish inshallah. One of the incidents that transpired, because now Imam is under constant surveillance of under the guards of Mutawakkil. Mutawakkil was even worse, a more evil person than his predecessor. Imam Mutawakkil says, he called his scholars, his courtiers, those scholars, and he says, I have made a vow that Mutawakkil had become very sick, he was at the brink of death. And he made another, sukkah as we call it. He made another and a vow that I will give mal kathir. In Arabic, mal is wealth. Kathir is too much. He just used this metaphorical sentence that I will give mal kathir for charity. And he became well. Now Mutawakkil thinks that this kathir means a lot. But lot means how much? How much to give? I mean, he has not named a figure. Says how much to give. So they went to one of the advisors of Mutawakkil and said, how much? Apparently there were scholars there. He said 1,000 dinar. Okay, and he said another scholar, he says, how much is kathir? He says 100,000 dinar. And he said, no, I'm not satisfied because you all are giving me different answers. No. None of these makes sense because every person that I'm asking is giving me a different amount. But technically, I want to know the exact amount, what this kathir means. I want to know this kathir. Get me Al-Hadi. Now, it was not easy for Imam Al-Hadi. This was happening at night, after midnight, past midnight. Imam Al-Hadi did not even sleep during the time of Mutawakkil till he died. he could not sleep a full night's sleep. They would come and wake him up at night. And next night they would come and wake him up again. That Mutawakkil wants you. This is the way they made him suffer. So in the middle of the night, Imam Al-Hadi is dragged to the palace. In the night, Mutawakkil says, I have made a vow, if I get well, I will give charity, Male Kathir. Male Kathir is a lot, Kathir is a lot. But I don't know about what lot is. So Imam says, Mutawakkil, you could have waited till the morning. I mean, I was in deep sleep. And you dragged me out? He says, no. You have to tell me now. So Imam says 83 dinar. 83. Give 83 dinar in charity. And he says, sorry? Did I hear you right? Imam says, yes, 83 dinar. Give 83 dinar. And Mutawakkil says, 83, why? This says 1,000, this says 5,000, this says 100,000. 83, why? Imam says, because of the verse in the Quran. Now, which verse? Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. وَلَقَدْ نَصَرَكُمُ اللَّهُ فِي مَوَاتِنَ كَثِيرًا. This is one of the words. The only verse in Quran that has got this vocabulary, which is kathira or kathir. So Imam says, because of this word, وَلَقَدْ نَصَرَكُمُ اللَّهُ فِي مَوَاتِنَ كَثِيرًا. Allah has given you victory in mawatin. Kathira means, say you want kathir in the Quran, this is the word with kathir. He says, what does this verse mean? He says, Allah gave the Prophet 83 victories in his lifetime. And these 83 victories are known as kathir in the Quran. So therefore you will pay charity of 83 dinars. وآخر الدعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for, inshallah, for all of us to be raised, inshallah, with Imam Al-Hadi in qabr, in the mahshar, inshallah, and may Allah allow us and grant us the tawfiq to follow his message in this world and in the hereafter. أفضل الصلاة السلام عليك يا رسول الله محمد وآل محمد صلوات صلوا على محمد. محمد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
और मोहम्मद आले मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु ज़माने के इमाम की खिदमत में हम इमाम अली नक़ी अलैहिस्सलाम की विलादत पर मुबारकबाद पेश करते हैं। सो इमाम की विलादत के सिलसिले में एक बुलंद तरीन दूध पढ़ दीजिए। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला मुहम्मद व आले मुहम्मद। घर अली नहीं आते जिंदगी नहीं आती, जिंदगी नहीं आती, रोशनी नहीं आती, रोशनी नहीं आती, بندگی نہیں آتی، روح کے گلستان میں تازگی نہیں آتی، وہ رسول کا بستر گر نہ تو بھلا دیتا، قتل مرحب و انتر گر نہ تو بھلا دیتا، فتح خندق و خیبر گر نہ تو بھلا دیتا، وہ غدیر کا منبر گر نہ تو بھلا دیتا، شیخ تیرے حصے میں، شیخ تیرے حصے میں تیرگی نہیں آتی، گھر علی نہیں آتے، اللہم صلی اللہ، گو سکون ملتا ہے اللہ کے نعروں میں، گرمیوں کے روزوں میں، بیریا نمازوں میں، سوز عشق ملتا ہے ماتمی جوانوں میں، بیٹھتا نہیں جب تک آدمی ملنگوں میں، دل لگی تو آتی ہے، دل لگی تو آتی ہے، عاشقی نہیں آتی، گھر علی نہیں آتے، زندگی نہیں آتی، نفس بیچ کر اپنا کس سکون سے سویا، اس کا ایک شب سونا کائنات نے دیکھا، جب تلک نہ ہو تکیا مرضی الہی کا، اور نگر میسر ہو بستر رسول خدا، مرتضیٰ کو بستر پر نیند ہی نہیں آتی، مرتضیٰ کو بستر پر نیند ہی نہیں آتی، کلمہ جس کا پڑھتے ہو بغض ان سے رکھتے ہو، بھیک کے بھی طالب ہو دم بھی ان کا بھرتے ہو، ان کے دشمنوں سے تم راہ و رسم رکھتے ہو، دعوی محبت ہے دشمنی بھی کرتے ہو، کیسے امتی ہو تم، کیسے امتی ہو تم، شرم ہی نہیں آتی، کیسے امتی ہو تم، شرم ہی نہیں آتی، جو بھی ورد ناد علی صبح و شام کرتا ہے، जो दरूद आले नबी सुबह शाम पढ़ता है, गम हुसैन का रख कर दम अली का भरता है। उनके दुश्मनों पर जो बेशुमार करता है, पास ऐसे बंदे के बेकली नहीं आती, पास ऐसे बंदे के बेकली नहीं आती, घर अली नहीं आते, जिंदगी नहीं आती। दुरूद और मोहम्मद आल।
السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين وابن سيد الوصيين، السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين، السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولى وابن مولى، السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء، السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء، السلام عليك يا ثالث شروط لا إله إلا الله، السلطان أبا الحسن مولانا علي بن موسى الرضا، كن شفيعنا وشفيع والدي في يوم الجزاء، وارفقنا الله لزيارتك يا مولا، ورزقنا الله شفاعتك في الدنيا والآخرة. الصلاة والسلام على آبائك الطاهرين وأبنائك المعصومين وأختك فاطمة المعصومة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب العصر والزمان، سيدي الأمان الأمان الأمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان، السلام عليك يا إمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان، عجل الله لك ما وعدك من النصر وظهور الأمر ورحمة الله وبركاته. أفضل الصلاة السلام عليك يا رسول الله ومحمد وآل محمد، صلوا على محمد.